And we're back. I can never do. Anytime I do that, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to end up.
I know you're going for the middle finger there.
I'm like, wait, that's not going to work. I'm like, I want to make sure that one's down.
Well, you're supposed to go like this, and then this, and then.
Is that it? Okay. See, you're the video guy, man. So
yeah,
but I did switch. If anybody cares, I now have LED lights, and they're basically right on top of me. And what's fun is I can now, with my handy dandy remote, I can say that's just a little too bright. Hold on. And in theory.
Oh, wow.
So now I'm sitting in the dark. Still, what I might do with these, which is interesting, because when I make them darker, then my camera just readjusts and it makes me grainy. So I found if I boost the lights and then the camera automatically adjusts, because I'm just using a C920. But I have found what I might get is they make these clamps that you can put right on your, it's kind of like one of these for a microphone, only you just put a thing for the light. And I'm like, that might be cool. Because I would like to have these fairly close, get the stands off the ground, and then just turn these down. It's a little more shadowy. I mean, we could do shadow puppets now probably if we wanted to, but I'm just happy just to get some of my office back, because those are much smaller than the other ones I have. Do I have a link for those? I would have to. I will send it to you later, Ryan. I do, but I have to go through my Amazon history to do that. That's another fun update. Here's the fun thing. If you're new to my history, Joe, I have been kicked out of Amazon twice now.
How did you get back in? Because I got kicked out early this year, and I've been frustrated ever since.
Yeah, the first time I submitted something with the School of Podcasting as my website. Then I accidentally used an iframe. Gone. Second one, I submitted Logical Weight Loss, because that website gets a lot of traffic. Got right in and didn't realize, well, it's just, again, this is all my fault. You can't send affiliate links through email. Well, I was turning my website into a blog post, or, basically my episode was a blog with a, audio file on it. And that would then automatically take my RSS feed into ConvertKit. It would turn it into a newsletter and send it out. Well, hello, affiliate links are now in your newsletter. So that got me, I'm assuming, banned, because Amazon, much like Apple and Google, they're not talking about it. They're just like, you're gone. So I'm like, I'm going to try again. And every time I'm not trying to scam anybody. I'm putting in my actual social security number and everything else. I was really surprised that didn't get me flagged last time, but now I'm out of really popular websites. So I submitted another website that doesn't get as much traffic, and consequently, I didn't get hardly any. I don't think I got any sales. So they went, "Ooh, you are a small pants little, no, go away, kid, you bother me." So I've now switched all my. It's weird because I had every link that was on my website. I switched to samedaymusic.com and got 4 orders. So I switched to B&H because B&H looks a little more professional than Same Day Music. Although Same Day Music had no taxes and free shipping, but their website looks a little 2002-ish, and B&H is a little more. Plus, B&H sells everything. I mean, B&H sells TVs and Macs.
Yeah.
And
have you been there?
I have not been there. I've heard it's like Kmart for geeks. Yeah.
I've been before I went there, I was told it's like the North Pole, because there's like the boxes are going overhead on the conveyor belts and stuff like that, and it is really cool.
Yeah, MapCon, you said MapCon is in September this year, right?
Yeah, so it's September 6th and 6th through the 8th.
Yeah, so they were asking about that in the chat room. August is Podcast Movement in Orlando, or wherever they're having it at.
Yeah,
March is PodFest in Orlando, then Podcast Movement in August, and then MapCon in September. So, and then anything else that pops up between now and then.
No, actually, that was Philadelphia. Why do they still got the Philadelphia up? That's weird.
Are we moving?
It's in Orlando.
What? Oh, Podcast Movement?
No. Yeah, Podcast Movement. August. August 13th to the 16th in Orlando.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. I'll be interested to see the thing that people have mentioned about that with Podcast Movement being in Orlando in August is, I guess that is official hurricane season. Like,
Yeah, it is.
there's
Yeah.
like wabbit season and then there's hurricane season. I'm like, because I remember 1 year, September MapCon, we had people Neil couldn't make it because of a
Yep.
hurricane.
Last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that whole Mother Nature thing can really kind of throw a monkey wrench in it. What's what's the probably the thing most people don't realize if they think about running an event? Because you run obviously MapCon. And
Mhm.
when we say MapCon, we mean midatlanticpodcast.com. It's just
Yes.
easier to say MapCon. But like, what's the one thing that most people that think I'm going to start a live event that you want to go?
You either need a lot of people who are good at a bunch of like different things, like if setting up audio equipment or programming or coordinating, a bunch of speakers or website building, or you need to be able to do a lot of those things and be decent at them, or at least find, do the research to get a footing. I would also say go in with having a goal. How many people you want to have at the event, how many people can you logistically handle at the event, and finding a location that isn't crazy expensive. But again, it also depends on who's your target audience. So I would start with like, who's the target audience that you're trying to bring to. I think Dave, I remember I talked to you like a month and a half ago about like, hey, what if we brought it to this hotel instead? And you were like, you brought up a great point that didn't even cross my mind. Is like, well, yeah, but the room is going to be much more expensive for that hotel rather than like the Holiday Inn where we have it. Because there's another hotel I'm thinking about, but it's not necessarily right in the Philly area. It's in Atlantic City. And the rooms, I could probably get them to do the rooms about the same price as Holiday Inn, but it'll be at a casino in a much, much, much cooler location right on the beach in early September. So, yeah. So
That might be
I'm
interesting.
actually debating it. I mean, it's not near a major airport. I mean, it's about an hour from the Philly airport, but there is the Atlantic City airport. So I'm kind of thinking about it. I'm not positive.
Well, that's just where you do the old I'm going to pretend I'm in this city. How do I get there? And then you go to
Yeah.
whatever, travelocity.com and see what it would cost and that whole 9 yards. And what's an Uber ride from, this
Philly
airport to
to
here? Yeah.
yeah, it'll definitely be a lot more, but there's trains too. You can take the train right down to Atlantic City, and then it's not too far of a walk
Nice.
from the train to the hotel I'm thinking of. So um
Well, it's like in Tennessee, like Ray Edwards and Michael Hyatt, they love to do things in Franklin, Tennessee, because there's this it used to be an old mill that they turned into a mall, and this part of like I don't know if you look at the thing and it's from left to right, like the third on the right hand side, it's just this giant room where you can go in and it has a stage and the whole 9 yards. It's a great place to have a little event. The bad news is there's no easy way to get to Franklin, Tennessee. You're going to Nashville and you've got a good 45-minute drive. And I'm like, and everything there, once you get there, is dirt cheap because it's Franklin, Tennessee. Ain't nothing going on in Franklin, Tennessee. And it's a really cool event. Cliff had his thing there. Cliff Ravenscraft had his dream the dream or live the dream or live your truth or whatever the event was. And from what I understand, it was a really great event. But everybody seems to be doing things in Franklin, Tennessee. So I think, like in your case, if you're saying it's not near an airport, I think if once you get there, it's not super expensive. I think people might do that because then the money you spend on an Uber, you save on a hotel. So
yeah. I mean, yeah. I gotta do a little investigating, but especially before we get to January 1st, where we make a final decision. So it's still thinking about it. But I think that's that. Going back to like conferences, like transportation, the type of people, how many people, things like that. Like that hotel that I'm talking about for that possibly use Mapcom for. That's where I plan on doing the live event for my mastermind group at the end.
nice.
So it's like, hey, we did 3 months together. Like, let's go to this hotel. It's a casino. It's right on the beach. I mean, it'll be like February, but it'll
Right.
be awesome. Like, it'll be a lot more fun than I don't know, some.
Well, that's where I had a friend of mine point out on the School of Podcasting, somebody said, "Hey, I would join the School of Podcasting, but I can't afford it, which is $49 a month. But I'm going to Podfest or Podcast Movement, one of those."
Oh,
And he goes,
wow.
because you
Okay.
do realize there's like a couple $100 at least for a plane ticket, an Uber ride, plus tickets for the podcast movement, plus this. And he's like, they can't afford $49 a month. And he's like, Dave, you're not selling your value enough. I'm like, that's a good point. It was a marketing guy. He's like, did you hear that on your show? And I'm like, you know, people have their own budgets. I don't judge. I'm like, whatever. But that is the thing you have to keep in mind. It's you're looking for somebody not who just has the time available, but what's their budget? Can they afford, you know, and sometimes depending on like, I think that's why a lot of people have things in Vegas, because to fly in and out of Vegas is for me at least, and I'm on the other side of the country, usually not as expensive as I think it is. I don't know how they pull that off. I guess because it's Vegas and people want to go there. I don't know, supply and demand. You would actually think it'd be higher because of supply and demand, but I know anytime I've ever gone there, it's like, really? I can get there for $112 both ways. And I'm like, really? Wow, that's crazy. So, but there is more to an event than just getting at the event and feeding them. You got to the travel. It's like you said. And I love the fact that the first point was, okay, you have to figure out who your audience is. Because I
Yeah.
know I just did the We Are podcast thing, and
I'm
this is
so jealous. I wish I was there.
it was a different event. And the thing that I was like, well, that's different. He threw it out. Now, if he does it or not, we'll see. Because I'm like, is that? He said for We Are Podcast 20, you're going to have to apply to go. And I'm like,
So then,
that's
no, we is like really exclusive. We,
yeah. So I was like, that's a different approach and extremely times like now you got to interview everybody. I'm like, now granted that price of that ticket is probably not going to be what it was, which it wasn't cheap anyway. But I was like, that's different. That's okay. It's a different approach. I guess you're going to throw it on the wall. And again, we got a long way off before that event. So I think at this point they were saying you're going to, and I'll say, all right, we'll see if that's still in play come 2019 or however long it's going to do that. So
yeah, I think from a sales perspective, that is an awesome idea though, because it gets you to have that personal connection in a way that like you open your way up to open up more money. If that's what their goal is. But again, that they're looking for very specific types of people to be a part of that. So I mean I think it's awesome. I wish I could have went because was it rather small?
no, it was wasn't huge. It was
Like the pictures I saw looked like there was only, if I had to guess, maybe like 30 people, 50 people.
no, it was more than that. It was closer to 100, maybe a little over. I know
Oh,
the thing I
wow.
thought was interesting is there's a like an above shot, like where it's a hotel and there's a spot where you could look down over floor 1. And so the camera crew went up to level 2 and they're like, "Hey everybody, we're doing the shot. Come out here and stand here." And I'm here to tell you that is not everybody, because it looks like there's, like you said, like there's maybe 40 people there. And I'm like, no, because there were 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be 30. Yeah, somewhere around 100 people. So it wasn't huge. And actually,
That's not bad.
yeah, somewhere between 100 and 200. Because I know, see, I didn't really pay attention. I kept sitting at the front row. So I wasn't, if I was in the back, I could have counted how many tables there were. So I'm trying to do that from memory. But that's why I love MapCon. That's why I love DC Podfest. And nothing against Podfest and Podcast Movement, but and both have different pluses and minuses. Like the cool thing about Podcast Movement and Podfest, a lot more vendors there, so you get to play with toys and things like that. And you get to kind of see everybody, because most people are like, oh yeah, I'm going to that one. Where at the smaller events, usually I'm running into people I don't know, or and plus I have more time to get to know them for some reason. I mean, I know at MapCon there's always plenty of time at night to just kick back and talk and have fun. So that, and the fact that especially because it's a single track, that's the other thing. Now DC Podfest this year I don't think is a single track, but I love single track stuff because everybody goes through the same exact thing. To me, that's always a cool kind of.
I love that too, because you get the inside jokes and it gets the you really get to be around the same people, and that's one of the reasons why, as an admirer of you guys getting to go down to Australia, it's like, dude, you guys got to like hang out with Pat Flynn, and it looked like such a small amount of people that you probably got to spend a lot of time with Pat Flynn, which was
Yeah,
probably awesome.
well, what it was is the first 2 days, like 2.5, because they did the thing where day one you have workshops, which is really not true day one, and then
Right.
you have day one and day two. So you had that, and then the way he worked it is you spent basically another 2.5 days with just the speakers. It was like a speakers retreat, and that was just fun from the minute it started. It was just and it wasn't that I was like hanging out with Pat Flynn, although I did get to talk to him more than I ever have. In fact, we went to the airport together, and at the end he's like, man, you know what, he goes, I'm really glad I got to hang out with you. And likewise, that's why I say Pat Flynn is hilarious, and he does not let that show on his podcast, or he's got his brand kind of thing. And not that he's completely different, but he's very funny. And he just, for me at least, he kept hitting my funny bone, and his timing is impeccable. Same thing with Jordan Harbinger. Both those guys are really, really funny. And actually everybody there, it was just a good time. And it dawned on me that it'd been a long time since I'd had any kind of vacation. Because in the past, my vacation was going to Podcast Movement. I would actually take my vacation and go to Podcast Movement before I worked for Libsyn. And so I've never really had a time where, and plus, because I was in Australia, half the time my phone didn't work. So I really was pretty unplugged. Dave said, is there a single track or a similar show that is really good for beginners? Well, I would, MapCon is a good one. DC Podfest. I mean, really, if somebody's taken the time to put together an event, I've yet to go to one that I'm like, oh, I'm not going back to that. There's always been.
Did you go to the one in, was it Oregon or Portland or Washington,
PodCon?
Seattle? Yeah,
Seattle?
PodCon. Yeah,
PodCon was different. And that was not really a how-to. That was more for the listeners. Same thing with LA Podcasters, something they put something together.
LA Podfest, I think it's called.
And that's more for the listeners. So when I walked in and like people are dressed up, they're doing cosplay, and I was like, what is this stuff? Which was cool because I felt like Dorothy going from black and white to color. Then I'm like, I knew of Welcome to Nightville. I had never heard of the Green Brothers, which some people that they will spit out their coffee when I say that. And I just remember, I mean, it looked like a bond. I mean, there was 1,000 people there. Easy. I mean, I walked into the back of their big room, and they've got 3 giant screens, and these guys walked out, and it was like the Beatles. It was like what is it? K-pop. Who's the big, there's some big
BTS one or something.
Yeah. It's like those guys. I'm going crazy. And I don't know who any of them are. And I'm like, I cannot feel any more like an old white guy right now. I'm like, I just out of the loop of that. And the one guy, they asked like, what was the weirdest job you ever had? And they're going through and like, I worked at a movie theater. I worked pizza, blah, blah, blah. And the one guy said like camp counselor, and people laugh. So it had something to do with who he is and what he thinks and what he does, that this was like so not the job for him. But it was like nighttime at the Apollo where people are not just laughing. They're like, and they're out of their chair and they're rolling around. And it was like,
wow.
Oh. And I just went, okay, I don't get the joke. I'm like, that's amazing that guy just got that thing. And I just went, and to me, I was very happy because I'm like, wait a minute, I've been in my little like podcast about podcasting bubble. Meanwhile, there's this much bigger bubble over here. They had a thing where you got there was a lottery to see if you could get a wristband to be one of the 300 people in line to meet one of the Green Brothers. I'm like, that's a new kind of fame right there. Not like the line forms there. It's like, oh, did you get a lottery ticket to give you the wristband to get in line? I went, who? That's when like I was like, there are actual quote YouTube stars. I mean, the one, and personally, I don't get it. There's some girl that puts on bright red lipstick and she just talks annoying. And she was on Comedians with Cars Getting Coffee with Jerry Seinfeld. Now the reason she was on that, Follow the Money, is she also got a Netflix show. So Netflix was trying to cross promote because the whole time, and you could even tell Jerry Seinfeld is like, who is this person? Because she would not come out of character. That was the other thing, was really, she did for like 10 seconds at the end where they show her taking off the makeup, but her character was annoying. I think it annoyed Jerry Seinfeld. And I think her Netflix show is now gone, but
you remembered her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she did. She inspired me to go, ooh, I don't. But on the other hand, I'm not a 21-year-old female, which I think is her target audience. So it doesn't mean she's not talented. I'm just like, I didn't get it. But so there are, like YouTube has, if you talk to anybody with kids, you will get to this eventually. Joe, how old's your oldest one? Probably like what, 6?
2.5. 6, two
Okay.
and a half.
But when they Rob Walsh has, I think, an 8-year-old, and he says that's all they watch is YouTube. He goes, forget like
Yep,
TV is like
Ava
he
loves
goes,
Blippi.
yeah. So I think that's gonna, Miranda. And Daniel says, I hate that character. I do as well. And for years, I don't know that was all an act. Yeah, I would believe it. It is an act. Lynn says, what activity or event do you think would be a game changer for a podcast conference? The game changer is up to you. It really is. Because I could go to Podcast Movement and talk to nobody and get nothing out of it. You've really got to go there. And like Jordan, I love Jordan's show. I think Jordan's very funny. He's been on my show. But we were sitting around talking and stuff, and I asked him, I go, what was the weirdest job you ever had? And he worked in a movie theater. And that just started the conversation, and then you just get to know people. Had I not thrown out a stupid question like, what's the weirdest job you've ever had? And if you're not open-minded, I had some sort of weird holographic kinesis something thing done to me where they released energy to different dimensions. Okay. If I hadn't said, yeah, I'll give that a shot. If I'd said, oh, I don't believe in that stuff, I was like, all right, let's see what happens, But game changer, that's that's a fun one. Because to me, go ahead, Joe.
Well, I think our the way we do the podcast competition's a game changer for a lot of people. Like I get a lot of great feedback of people that are like, it opened my eyes.
Yeah.
It's a workshop thing, but it's a competition, and it's so basically, Lynn, the podcasters you get in a group of 4, and you have 20 minutes with a envelope of five words in it. And it enables you to have to put together a 5-minute podcast within 20 minutes out of those 5 words. And that for a lot of people is just, they're hilarious.
Yeah.
This year's were really, really funny. And this year they weren't even able to be seen. So they had to really channel their inner podcaster.
Yeah, that's something I've watched in the past, and it was kind of like, because again, they're making it off the top of their head. It's improv, and I'm like, that was a little weird. That was different, or in some cases funny. But then I talked to the people that participated, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so glad I did this. I never would have done this." So it really like kicked people out of their comfort zone. And I was like, that's why we're doing that. Yeah. So it really is for the people that participate, especially, it was a cool thing. But and for me, like I always use the example of social media marketing world. Because I have a podcast, because I know Daniel J. Lewis, I said, I might move the school of podcasting. I'm not sure which back end I want to move to, Thinkific or Teachable, or I'm on WordPress. And he's like, oh, these guys at the membership guys have this cool like flow chart. It shows like a bunch of them. So I go over, I sign up for the membership guys, get their thing, rebuild the school of podcasting. I stay a member at the membership guys, and I now know Mike, who's the guy that runs that. I'm at Podcast Movement, I think in Orlando or Florida. It was something in Orlando, talking to Mike. In walks Pat Flynn, who again, I kind of know. We always bump into each other, but again, we just small talk. Michael Stelzner walks over to talk to Pat. Stelzner also knows Mike from the membership guys, and he knows Pat. So we sat there and had like a 20-minute conversation, and I've never really got to talk podcasting with Michael Stelzner. Now, because of that conversation, I was then asked to speak at Social Media Marketing World. So I think it's one of those things where a lot of times you're at these events planting seeds and you have no idea. I just had somebody last week that contacted me. I met you. I went to Tennessee because one of my clients was having a podcast launch. And she says, look, she's a private investigator. The show's called Without Warning. And she's actually getting leads on a cold case that she was working on. She goes, I'm going to have a room full of private investigators that want to start a podcast. And I'm like, okay, I'm driving to Tennessee. But I met somebody there, and it was like, so that was months ago. And I just got an email this week. Hey, I met you in Tennessee. So you just never know, what's going to happen. And that's where I try to attend as many as I can. And that's where it's tough because it's a budget, but that's where I go, no wife, no kids, more budget for me. So, but Joe, have you ever been to an event that you look back later and go, because of that event, this happened or
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, to go along with Emily's question about inside, what podcast do you fanboy over? Really, there's only been one show that I would say I would fanboy over, and that show is no longer the same crew. They passed it on to another crew, which I did not find as funny or interesting. And that was WDW Today, all about Walt Disney World Today, and it was 3 days a week, starting back in 2005, I believe, late 2004. I started listening like late 2005, and they would do if it wasn't for that show, I definitely would not have been into podcasting at all. And they would do a reunion event each year where for like 4 days, people, fans of the show would come to Disney World and they would ride rides together, like to a point where we would fill entire like the ride to capacity. Like you would go into like the theater and we would fill the whole theater, and we would do like inside jokes with like a script going to the show, like in the Carousel of Progress, for example. And that to me opened up a whole new world of like meeting lots of people and wanting to like get involved with podcasting and fanboy out. And I'm still sad to this day. I mean, it's been probably about 4 or 5 years since they passed the torch. Maybe about three to 4 years since they passed the torch to the new people. And I'm still sad because, like, even though I don't go to Disney World all like as much as I did a few years ago, where I was going like 4 to 6 times a year for races and stuff, it still pains me that they're not around anymore, because I would listen every third, every other day I was listening.
Yeah, it's weird for me because now the ones that I fanboy over, like the ones that I really like, I love David Hooper. I think he's funny. I think he's hilarious, and he's always coming. He's very transparent as to what's going on. He's got a great marketing brain. And so when I see him, there's two things. It's like, I like him because of his show, but I've known that guy for like 10 years. So it's kind of weird. When I got to meet and kind of hang out with Dan Class, who does The Bitterest Pill, that was interesting because I did the fanboy thing where I was like, remember when you called your daughter Princess Tirade? Well, Dave, that was 9 years ago. No, he doesn't remember that. And just that whole thing. So it was kind of weird to kind of just hang with somebody that I've only known through the podcast. But there's another guy. We always bumped into each other at different events. And we both, I think, listened to each other's shows. So that was kind of weird that we knew each other through the podcast, but not really got to hang with each other. But inside jokes, that's the part I can't get. But there are people like Dr. Ryan Gray, who does all the shows for medical students, of which I can't remember his website. And I don't listen to a show because I'm not a medical student, but he does great stuff. He's always got these because of my podcast stories. So I'm always excited to see him because he's just a great dude. And he's going to probably, like, he was the guy that last week we're talking about those business cards with a chip in them that you can put your phone over and it automatically subscribes people to your show. That's the guy that discovered that. So there are some people I like to see just because I know that guy's going to give me something that's probably going to be very, very cool. So, but David Hooper's one. He does a Red podcast. He does big podcast. In fact, he just did an episode that said, "Hey, I've been gone for 2 months. Here's what I've been up to. I don't recommend stopping your podcast for 2 months." But the Red podcast was hilarious. He interviewed a hooker, for lack of a better phrase, to say, how do you promote your business when your business is illegal? And I was like, okay, that's not your grandpa's marketing show. He had a guy that called him up that said, we're from the IRS and you need to pay your IRS, easy for me to say, the IRS bill in iTunes gift cards. Everybody's seen that scam. He actually eventually got that guy to come on, and it's just some kid in Iran that's trying to get money for a motorcycle. And I was like, that's awesome. But he got behind the scenes stuff. So he's good at getting stuff. And it's not all like weirdo hookers and, IRN.
It sounds like it should be, though. That sounds way, way interesting.
Yeah. But it was stuff you couldn't get anyplace else. The newest show that I now listen to is called What Was That Like by Scott Johnson. And he's interviewing people that got their legs blown off in Iran. some lady that can't sleep for like days at a time. I know he wants to interview somebody who's been struck by lightning. I don't know if he's found that yet. So it's just stuff you can't get anyplace else. But at any rate, are they having a new Media Expo this year? No, the new Media Expo is dead. I was part of the last one. I came on board to watch Rick Calvert steer that thing right in the wall. And trust me, we're glad he did, because at the last meeting that I had with him, he said, "What kind of feedback did you get?" And I said, "Okay, our audience doesn't like this. They don't like that we're all separated. Our community cannot find each other. They don't want to be part of the NAB. They want to have their own community. And yes, it's a smaller event, but they're more connected and they'll grow that community. They don't want to be part of NIB at this point." And he said, "Well, that's too bad." And I went, "Oh, okay. Thank you for your feedback. I'm going to ignore it all." And I even said things like, because the very last year we had like this little, we were a crumb on the NAB, National Association of Broadcasters, huge, huge conference. I mean, like ginormous. Like take all the podcast conferences we just mentioned, put them all together, and it's a quarter of the size of NAB. I mean, it's you can't even fathom it. We were this crumb, and then you literally had to walk, I'm going to guess, a half a mile to where the classes were. So consequently, nobody can find the community. We couldn't find where we are at night to go have a beverage together. It was horrible. And from what I heard, when you went to the classes, they weren't bad. Thank you. I was the guy that got the speakers, but yeah, it was not a great event, to say the least. And he was going to keep doing it right that way. And instead, he disappeared. He's not dead, by the way, because after over 2 years, they almost paid me what they owe me. They still owe me, they used to owe me this much. Now they owe me this much. And I'm like, well, that's good. But I really thought he was dead, because he just flaked out and disappeared. So that is the fun of that's why there is no new Media Expo. So anyway, but hey, we're over time, and Joe's probably got things to do.
Probably.
He's got wife and kids and all sorts of stuff. So, but
got some Blippi to watch.
That's it. And thanks everybody for the chat room. We will be back in 2 weeks. And if you're at DC Podfest, please come kick me in the hall or something to say hi. I always hate to hear that. I didn't want to bug you. No, bug me, please.
He wants to be Kim Kardashian. I mean, come on now.
That's it. I could not take her voice though after a while, because she does the thing where I had a hamburger, or I went to the grocery store, or everything ends in a question for her. And I was like, once I noticed it, I was like, oh, I can't upspeak, I believe is what they call it. And I couldn't take it. So at any rate, so everybody have a good weekend, and we will see you in 2 weeks back here on Ask the Podcast Coach. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, sir. Take care.